welcome everyone to this second live talk in this series of our learning circle, which has the title How to Find the Right Impact Investor. My name is Huub Jongen from World Startup. Within the company, my job is that of Startup Support Director, which means that I have to make sure that all the startups that we work with get the best possible support in terms of training, in terms of mentoring, in terms of connection above all. And since we work with startups a lot, we also tend to see what they're struggling with. And one of the things that we see them struggling with is, hey, I know I have to find funding to grow, to make my impact happen. I know I should be talking to investors. If it's not now, then soon. But what about impact and investment? So how do I make sure that I find investors that have this same focus on impact as I have? How do I prevent that I'm getting into conversations that are only about return on investment and numbers and spreadsheets? And how can I keep that conversation going? So that's the reason why we thought we should start this learning circle. And of course, then we thought, okay, we should involve others here. And we were lucky to find Michelle, who is an expert on impact and also helped founders to find the right impact investor. She will introduce herself in a bit. And we also found a few really interesting speakers for this series of live talks. And we have two really special ones today. They will also be introduced by Michelle in a bit. And yeah, as I said, this is all part of this learning circle, where we would like to organize a series of conversations with founders, among founders, with the help of experts. And yeah, these live talks are just the start of that, to inspire you, to give you the necessary insights. So let's do it. Michelle, the floor is yours, and please introduce yourself and then introduce our awesome speakers of today.
I'm very excited about our awesome speakers. I'm just going to share a little slide deck. Hopefully that works. Oops. So my name is Michelle Chaklackle. I'm an impact business consultant. So what that means is I help companies align their value propositions, business models, leadership, and teams for impact. And I mainly work in the social enterprise sector. And as Huub said, we have a series of moderated talks this March. Today, we're having a conversation with Yenzo and Pavi from Tony Chocolonese about their impact story, or Tony's impact story, and how do you dream big and walk the talk. Next week, we're going to have a conversation with James Mitchell and Marai Schaffert. I hope I'm saying it correctly, from Stichting Doen. And James is an entrepreneur in Nairobi, and Marai is one of his impact investors. And what we'd like to learn there is what it takes to build this impact roadmap. And our last conversation we're going to be having was with Camille Sugrum, who is an entrepreneur, but in her past life was also an investor. And she'll be talking about the ins and outs of how do you build that entrepreneur impact investor relationship. And as Huub mentioned, we have a deeper dive and a learning circle in April. And that's for entrepreneurs who want to delve into the issues that we are talking about in these talks and come out and have a sense of what do they need to get in place for their impact investor conversations. And if you'd like to know more, Sarah's going to be putting some links into the chat so you could sign up. And before we begin, every talk, I'm going to have the same little spiel about what impact is, because as an impact consultant, what I notice is that we use this word a lot in the field, whether it's in social enterprise, in startups or nonprofits, but we aren't using the words in the same way. which becomes challenging when you actually want to define and reach impact. So the way we define impact in this space is the process of understanding how much change has happened in a span of time and how much of that can be attributed to your organization. And this is really important because when you hire someone to measure your impact, they're going to be operating from a definition like this. And so when they come in, usually a few years later, they begin to look at your company's entire impact. Your intended, unintended, positive, negative, direct, and indirect. So we'd like to do a poll. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And Sarah, do you want to pop up that poll? So we'd like to know, as a business, can you only have positive impact? As panelists, we can't answer. So there's no way to like fudge the results our way. And don't be shy. We'll give you a few more seconds. Oh, that was really fast. I'm grateful to see this because usually this is one of the quickest areas that I come in and someone says, my company only does positive impact. And then we have some really difficult conversations to say, hey, even if you do really positive actions, there can be some unintended negative effects. So this is great. I'm talking to an audience that is quite self-aware. So whenever someone says, I only have positive impact, to me, it's a red flag. And it sounds like it would be for you as well. The other part that I think is important to talk about, and this is why we wanted to have Tony's come in and have this conversation with us, is about vision. Most people think that a vision is aspirational, which it's true, but there's also a really clear operational piece about it. The vision tends to answer how your organization, your company will change the world. And so one of the things an impact consultant can see is they scan someone's vision and go, is this the level of impact the company seeks? And if not, usually we have to understand why. And the other thing is, well, before I jump into the other thing, if you notice something that's really beautiful about Tony's theory of change or roadmap is that their vision and mission are quite clear. How they measure impact leads directly to what they want to see in the world, which is 100% slave-free chocolate. And if you have questions about this, please feel free to pop it up in the Q&A chat box, and we'll take that towards the end of this talk. And the last thing a company needs is a clear problem statement. And the reason is that the problem statement and the impact are interlinked, because if you are a company that wants to see social change or any form of positive, environmental change, it's linked to a clear problem. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So Yenzo and Pavi, do you think you can unmute yourself? Are you able to?
Done.
You're done? Give me a sec and I'd like to give you a warm welcome. So as part of the introduction to, Yenzo and Pavi I'd like to let you know a little bit about their background, because both of them didn't just show up at Tony's, they had previous careers and histories. So Yenzo Van Zanten is Tony Chocolonini's Choco evangelist. And as you can see, he is fully covered behind him with paraphernalia, including Bernie. I'm not sure about that. And so his job is to tell the story of Tony Chocolonini's. And Tony Chocolonini's vision is a world where it's 100% slave-free chocolate. He's also an economist and an author and a fellow entrepreneur. His previous entrepreneurial ambitions drove him to set up Innocent Drinks in the Benelux region. And Yenzo is the initiator of the Sustainable Leadership and Entrepreneurship Program at the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam. And I'd also like to introduce Pavi. Pavi, do you want to say hi? Oh, you can unmute yourself too.
Hi, yes.
So Pavi is Tony Chocolonini's impact navigator. So she's responsible for measuring and validating Tony's impact on the ground. So that great dream, great vision, her job is to make sure that there actually are legs. And she was drawn to Tony's because of its mission-driven focus, and it's an impact company that makes chocolate, not the other way around. And prior to working at Tony's, she's worked at other nonprofits and other organizations. She's worked in India and Vietnam, and she has more than 10 years of experience in strategic planning, communication, monitoring, evaluation, and social research. So on that note, I'd like to hear both of you. I'll start with Yenzo. How would you describe your role? I've made it like very big, but tangibly, what is a day in the life of you, Yenzo?
Well, effectively, I could be considered the spokesperson of Tony's, but at Tony's, we don't really like that word spokesperson because we believe everybody should be able to tell the story. So we sometimes run into issues with that when we read in the media, according to the spokesperson of Tony's, and we have no idea who it was. So I would normally travel the globe and the galaxy and beyond to tell the story of Tony's, tell the story of the cocoa industry, and what we're trying to do as a company to reach our mission of 100% slave-free chocolate worldwide. I used to do that in person, and now I travel the globe digitally from, as you see, my tiny home studio.
Okay. And Pavi, how would you describe a day in the role of your life?
Well, firstly, I must say that the job title Impact Navigator is the coolest job title I've ever had. So I make sure that I use it often. So I'm the Impact Navigator at Tony's. But like you said, so a large part of my role is measuring and validating our impact on the ground. And what does this mean? It means that I not only look at how we're positively changing the sector, but also learning what we should do differently and or better, how we can be better accountable to our stakeholders, and also just ways in which we can continuously raise the bar. So I do believe that the financial and market success of a business can go hand in hand with sustainable business practices, much like caramel and sea salt, which is also my favorite Tony's bar.
Shameless plug, shameless plug. For those of you who are joining, Yenzo and Pavi have kindly agreed to share their LinkedIn information. You'll find that in the chat. And for those of you who are joining and know of Tony's or are not in the Benelux region, I'm going to ask Yenzo to say, what is Tony's? And tell us a little bit about the vision and the big dream.
Right. So I would say Tony's Chocolonely is a formerly small Dutch chocolate company. And I say formerly because we have grown, like I sometimes say, a family of rabbits over the last 7-8 years. And have become market leaders in the Netherlands in chocolate and are now available in more than 30 countries across the globe. But what we're trying to do is not become a big chocolate company, but becoming a player in a big movement towards change within the cocoa industry, because unfortunately in the cocoa industry, there's a very widespread and systemic problem of illegal child labor, up to even forms of modern slavery, in our opinion. And that is the fact that in the two major cocoa producing countries in the world, so those are Ghana and Ivory Coast, they produce more than 60% of all cocoa in the whole wide world. There are still today more than 1.5 million children doing illegal work, of which more than 95% work even under hazardous situations. And at least 30,000 of them are subject to something that can be considered modern slavery. Now, we think that's ridiculous in a product that everybody should be able to enjoy on a daily basis, whether you're eating chocolate, whether you're giving away chocolate, whether you're getting chocolate, whether you're producing chocolate, but also when you're growing cocoa beans at the beginning of that value chain. And unfortunately, the latter, those people tend to not really enjoy it as much as the people at the end of the value chain. So that is something that we're trying to resolve as a company, by showing the cocoa industry that it can be done in a different way, that you can make chocolate in a more sustainable and a more social way, but also by inspiring the rest of the industry to take responsibility, whether that's through true inspiration, by showing them that you can be financially successful and still do something good for the society and the planet around you, or by upping the pressure through governments and legislation, that there's more to be done when it comes to respecting human rights in your complete value chain. So that is in a nutshell what we do as a company and why we do things as a company.
So I just want to kind of delve into, you named a bunch of common statements made against impact-driven companies. One, that it's not profitable, and two, that it's not sustainable. What were some of the other critiques of Tony Chocolonely's when it first began?
You know, honestly, we never intended to become a company. We never intended to become a successful company, let alone a globally available chocolate company. We just wanted to create awareness around an issue that we ran into more than 15 years ago, because we've been on shelf for about 15 years now.
Yeah.
And it's just really about creating that awareness, and that grew to the fact that because companies weren't really listening, weren't really opening their doors to us to listen to us, to what we had to say, we realized, well, the only way to open their eyes and to get them to change their ways is by becoming a chocolate company ourselves. And we did, and it resonated with consumers. So, you know, it's really about, there hasn't ever been this pivotal moment in the history of Tony's that we were a chocolate company that then became more sustainable or more socially driven. We actually came to be because we just wanted to solve an issue that we saw. We saw nobody picking up the gloves to take their responsibilities seriously.
Well, that's actually an interesting finding or insight, that to raise awareness, you had to become a company. Do you see other, I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, obviously.
Yeah, you are. No, but this is also, for example, why, you know, I am, even though I'm a graduated economist, I'm not very much in favor of this continuous growth for the sake of growth. Not even for Tony's. But if you want to make an impact, you need to be noticed. And if you want to be noticed, you need to be noticeable. So we want to grow for people to see what we're doing, then hopefully start copying what we're doing, and then hopefully also start copying the important stuff, which is the back end of our brand, not just the front end of our brand, but really the value chain model that we set up. Where we want to create full transparency in our value chain, where we want to be able to pay a higher price and a fair price, or really a living income reference price, to the farmers that we source our beans from. And so that is why we even came to be, and therefore, indeed, even though you put some words in my mouth, that is also why we believe we want to grow to make impact.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks for reframing it. I'd like to ask Pavi, in terms of, can you speak a little bit about the value chain and the problem that Tony's trying to solve? I know Yenzo has spoken about it from a high level, but as an impact navigator, how does that work?
So all the issues that Enzo spoke about, right? So the issues in the cocoa sector, which is 1.56 million children in Ghana and Ivory Coast who are engaged in illegal child labor. At least 30,000 cases of modern slavery, and I say at least because it's likely to be more. You know that these numbers are difficult to measure. So so the numbers that we get, I think we can safely say that there is more in there. So these are the results of an underlying issue in the cocoa sector, which is poverty. Poverty is the root cause for children being engaged in child labor. No farmer wants to keep their child working on the farms and, you know, working with pesticides and chemicals, wielding machetes. No one wants that. Everyone wants their children to go to school. But if you don't have, if you aren't earning a basic living income, then how do you manage that? So that's kind of where, you know, that's the root cause of the problems in the cocoa sector. And then from an impact point of view, it's needed to be, then you need to like look at changing the sector in a more holistic manner as well. So which is why Tony's like we have a rights-based approach to doing business, because to change this, to solve the problems in the cocoa value chain, you can't have only a charity-based approach like a sustainability CSR program to address a problem here, build a school there. That's not the only thing that's going to work. You really need to have an eye-level way of doing business, and have a human rights-based approach in the way you do that business to bring about change.
No, thank you for spelling that out. I'm curious, I don't know if it's to you, Yenzo, or Pavi, in response to Tony Chocolonely's success, how have other bigger chocolate producers or players responded? Have they begun to openly speak about illegal child labor and slavery and change their value chains?
Well, they have, and chocolate producers are setting up plans to improve the level of sustainability that they operate at, and that is good, but it's not good enough, and it shows because on the ground the change isn't enough, and it shows in the latest reports that are coming out, because the numbers that Pavi just mentioned are recent numbers. And we think we can change this. So I would say this is the double role that Tony's always has to play as well, right? We want to inspire the rest of the industry to change their ways by leading by example and showing them that it can be done. But at the same time, we also need to be that annoying little mosquito buzzing around their ears, constantly keeping them awake and sometimes stinging. But also, you know, so it's a fine line we need to walk.
So like a layperson could say, well, if you are willing to pay, you know, better wages to people who are growing cocoa and selling it, would that be enough alone to change this? No. And how come?
We believe paying that fair price is one part of 5 sourcing principles that we really strongly believe in, of which taking your full responsibility for your value chain, so creating full transparency, as we say, working bean to bar, is one of the most important ones. The other one is to really create that direct and long-term relationship with these farmers. Paying that fair price is another one of them. Helping these farmers improve the productivity and the quality of the cocoa beans that they deliver to us is another one. And the 5th is to really help those cooperatives that these farmers are united in to have a stronger stand in the middle of that value chain that they operate in. So it's part of the whole package of solutions that we see as the best path toward creating that impact in the cocoa industry is paying that fair price. It is essential, but it's not enough.
And because that's a lot of different things that need to change to see that children potentially would not be engaged in illegal work.
Well, it's in the end, it's not that much. It's quite concise and a clear package of solutions, but it is a signal that only paying that fair price isn't enough, right? Because some chocolate producers say, we pay a premium and that's it. And we have noticed in the last 15 years that their premium isn't enough, because it's a long way from that living income reference price that we believe they should be paying. And B, it's also about really taking your responsibility when it comes to creating those long-term relationships with those farmers.
We're gonna, while we're chatting, we're gonna pop up a poll for the audience to answer, and it's around, you know, does your company have a vision that it takes generations to reach, 10 to 15 years to reach, and about 5? And one of the things that I'd like to hear from you, Yenzo, first is, you know, how far can you sell a dream when potentially the reality is generations away?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's generations away, right? I think we've shown that it, so I think we've shown that consumers are eager to jump on board of a positive movement from a consumer perspective for change, right? And we show them, and we want to also ingrain between their ears that you can actually make a change each and every day when you stand in front of a shelf, right? By making the right purchase decisions, or as a wise meme on the internet said much more eloquently than I can do, if you want them to stop producing crappy stuff, then simply stop buying crappy stuff. And that's the message I try to convey to consumers as well. So I don't think it's generations away. I'm quite convinced that we can reach that mission within, I don't know, 10 years time at a maximum. And effectively, honestly, Michelle, if everybody would change their purchase patterns tomorrow, we will change this problem tomorrow. So it can be done within a day's time. Obviously, that might be a bit of a dream from my side, but I strongly believe in that change, that it is possible.
Pavi, I'm curious, from a measurement perspective, are you as confident about this yeah?
Yeah, I mean, like Enzo said, right? It isn't generations away. It shouldn't be. In fact, it should have already been a generation ago when things should have changed for the better, right? Because we've seen these problems for a while now. And we know that systemic change takes time and it isn't easy, but this is not an excuse. It should be the reason to work together towards the same objective and to work together now. And also, I must say that human rights, universally implemented supply chain equality and no poverty is not a dream. It should be a reality, no?
Spoken well. That's why I brought the two of you to have this conversation. Well, thank you from the audience of sharing, from their company perspective, does it take generations or within a shorter time frame? My own experience of working with companies on an impact level, it could be a flaw. The very fact that if everyone changed their behavior tomorrow, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have these conversations. It usually tends to be in the 10 to 15 years or even longer when I work with companies to get that to that impact level. But I like your optimism. That makes me happy. In terms of, I have a tricky question, but and it's loaded. Is there a fine line between storytelling and story lying?
To me?
Yeah, to you, Yenzo.
Well, yeah, it's a bit like going to the casino. Either you win or you don't, right? So either you tell the truth or you don't. So the line might be quite thin, but I think it is essential if you want to be authentic that you tell the truth and that you're transparent. And I think sometimes our own complete transparency and honesty bites us in the behind because we're open about everything, also the stuff that we're not succeeding at yet, and also the fact that we would have wanted to change this industry a lot earlier than now. We're 15 years down the line and we're eager to have it change quicker. Mm-hmm. I think in this day and age, if you look at how educated the consumer is, how transparent the world has become, and how quickly information flies across the planet, it is even more essential to be honest and transparent and truthful. So that is storytelling, I would say. And story lying is a bit of the great amount of greenwashing that is going across the planet at the same time.
Tony's has been in the media often because I noticed that Tony's has a behavior where you out yourself before others out you. And I wanted to ask a little bit about Tony being the media around being removed from the slave-free chocolate list. And could you tell us a little bit more about this and how this relates to impact?
Yeah. So there is a list out there, a slave-free chocolate list that we were taken off of, and unfortunately, it's a list that has no clear criteria how to get on it nor how to get off it. And we were taken off because we worked together. This was what that person told us, because we worked together with one of the biggest chocolate producers in the world, Barry Callebaut, or Callebaut as we say abroad. We have always done this from the beginning because we're convinced that we can change that industry in the best way by working with that industry from within. We have our own separate stream of cocoa beans, and we pay extra to work with that separate stream of cocoa beans. But unfortunately, we were taken off the list because of that same reason, that we work together with the biggest chocolate producer in the world. We've been completely transparent and open about this from the beginning. No really clear idea why we were taken off that list for that reason. It's not a real certification. We are B Corp certified. We are Fair Trade certified. So we're not too worried about it, but unfortunately, a lot of people only read the headlines on social media, and this was picked up on social media and became a bit of a tiny storm. And we simply explained why we work in the way that we work and why we are convinced that to reach the most impact, we need to work in this manner. to show the rest of the industry that within their framework of profit making, within their framework of value chain, within their framework of operations, we need to show them that this can change instead of doing this in our own shed in our backyard. So that was what happened, and we're completely open and transparent about it. So we're explaining to the consumers why we have done this as we have always done.
Have you ever experienced a time where Tony's has decided to be transparent first, and that's affected business in terms of people not buying chocolate bars?
Well, I don't know. Maybe the industry and the consumers aren't used to so much openness and transparency. So sometimes we're, for example, quite open about the fact that even though we have never had any form of modern slavery in our value chain, we do run into incidents, and that for people sounds strange because they like to hear 0, 0, 0, but that doesn't solve the problem. Right? We want to run into these issues because then we can help these farmers remediate those issues of illegal child labor. So we're completely open about the amount of issues that we run into, the amount that we resolve as well, because that is why we want to run into them. So if you don't read on from there, people might say, so there's still issues with illegal child labor in your value chain, so I don't buy you anymore. Well, then I would say, well, then you can't eat any chocolate because the amount of illegal child labor or any form of child labor in any other chocolate bars that you might find is significantly higher than in the value chain that we have.
Well, I want to ask.
Sorry, I want to add to that because there's also a difference between our mission and our claims, right? So our mission is together we'll make slave-free the norm in chocolate, and that's what we're working towards. We don't ever claim that there is no illegal child labor in our supply chain. We actively look for it, and when we find it, we report on it and we try to remediate it, right? So it's all out there. Like every year on year, in our annual fair report, we report on how many cases we find, how many cases we remediate, and we haven't found any cases of modern slavery or forced labor in our supply chain. But I think there's also that distinction, since we are talking about impact and mission and vision, like there is a distinction between mission and claims. And and I think that just goes back to transparency, and we are transparent about what our mission is and what our claims are, and that just makes it easier as well. You know, when you get the criticism, it makes it easier because it's all out there, so you don't need to scramble for an answer or a reason or an excuse.
Well, I think I liked, what Yenzo said about the expectation that everything is going to be 0, 0 somehow within 15 years, although I understand the confidence that it could be changed tomorrow, that all of a sudden we wouldn't see these incidents happen. As a impact navigator and a person that's measuring, Pavi, do you notice that there's pressure not from Tony's, but from other impact equivalents in other companies, whether it's B Corp or otherwise, that the change should be happening faster? Or is there an understanding of these are systemic issues, and if you change one thing, other things also, there's a ripple effect?
Yeah, at least in the impact world, I think there's acknowledgement that there is an interconnectedness of issues on the ground, and also the key players who work towards those issues and are in the deep, right? So I think that's quite acknowledged. As long as I think with impact, it's not so much that the change should happen right now, but it's that do something to make sure that the change happens. So if you're doing due diligence in your supply chain, if you're like trying to pull responsibility and take full accountability of your supply chain, do it for 100% of your supply chain, not a part of it, and then report on that bit, right? So change can happen. Well, especially if you're looking at systemic issues and you're looking at a systemic change, it can happen for as long as you go fully in and pull it all towards you 100%. Because you can't, it's not a Band-Aid solution, right? You can't just keep slapping on Band-Aids here and there, trying to fix issues sporadically. It's really about taking the whole, and that's systems thinking for systems change.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm curious to hear both your perspectives on just societal changes or calls to action around decolonization and calling around things like Black Lives Matter, has that created any influence in terms of the kinds of campaigns that you're doing? I noticed that you have a partnership with Pharrell. I know that there's other things going on. Yeah, I'm curious of, how are you integrating these movements within Tony Chocolonely?
Enzo?
Yeah, sure.
I think over the years we've grown, and we've noticed that we might form a platform for more change makers that we can join up with to create even bigger impact than just focusing on the cocoa industry. And with all these subjects that you just mentioned, I think we've noticed that we can actually reach out to our consumers, but also have an impact internally as a company, have an impact on other entrepreneurs when it comes to taking your responsibility. And it's become more than just chocolate. And I think that is something that we noticed, that we can actually help speed up change in society. But maybe it sounds a bit pretentious if I'm saying that a tiny chocolate company could do that, but we do have the feeling that we have that obligation, at least, to try and reach out to more people, because we can convince a more diverse, equal, and fair world.
Yeah, no, the reason why I'm asking is what I'm noticing globally is, as you pointed out, you don't have a common link to modern day slavery, but a lot of these systemic issues globally, there is this unequal balance and imbalance around the world and resources. And we're in a position where these factors affect and influence each other. Yeah. I want to ask you, Pavi, what were your big lessons? Pavi and I have met in another lifetime. We worked together in a different organization. So I know her from a different context. In that context, we were working on human rights. I want to hear from you, not only in your experience at Tony's, but holistically, what were your big lessons when it came to connecting the story and walking the talk? And then what advice would you give entrepreneurs who are listening about that?
So I must say that my impact journey at Tony's actually has been not the easiest, but the most focused journey, right? Because like you said, in our previous worlds, like you're used to a very lofty goal and undefined ways to get there. And often impact is kind of brought in, a little bit as an afterthought, right? So I, the biggest, I think it's been great at Tony's simply because there's a very focused mission, a very clear vision, a very focused mission, and a very focused way of getting there. So our roadmap that Enzo described earlier, it's like everyone follows it. It's not just for the impact team or the sustainability team to follow, right? Like everyone, our marketing, sales, BI, operations, even our IT team uses the three pillars of the roadmap. Tony's creates awareness, leads by example, and inspires to act as a foundation for their strategy. So everyone, it's the same strategy for everyone. There's no separate impact strategy, which has just been so nicely different to my previous experiences. But I think the biggest lessons that I have, like when it comes to connecting the story or like the walking the talk, is what you said right at the beginning. Impact's not just about positive impact. There are mistakes, failures, problems in every impact journey, what we like to nicely call lessons learned. And these are also a part of your impact journey, and they need to be acknowledged, because only then can you actually learn from it. So even if you look at a traditional monitoring and evaluation role in an NGO, it's monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, right? So there's that learning part as well that kind of connects back what you learn from your impact validation and measurement back into your strategy. So that's, I think, a very important lesson to kind of keep in mind. And then that also links then to transparency. So you need to be transparent about the issues you encounter, not just outside, not just externally, but also internally, to be able to then acknowledge that these were mistakes that you've made along your impact journey. And that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from it. Specifically from like my experience at Tony's, it's that you cannot turn a blind eye to problems, right? You have to go to where the problems are most dire and then pull the problems towards you to be able to address them. That's not everyone's cup of tea, which is why we're dropped from lists and, you know, we make it to some lists and not other lists. But that's the fight we're fighting, right? So we want to change certain things in a particular sector. So we go to where those problems are most present, and we find ways to work in, you know, in a way that's the most scalable. So and that's okay as well. And finally, I think impact needs to really be embedded within your organization and be at the very heart of it, not like an awkward extra limb that's just, you know, dangling from somewhere. Really, because for systemic change, you really need a systems thinking approach, and it needs to come from within. So no amount of external, just, you know, sustainability programs in, you know, just slapped on to the existing way of doing business, that's not going to change it. You need to change from within.
So what I'm also hearing is don't hire external consultants to fix internal problems. I'm putting words into your mouth as
yeah, and those were words that were definitely not in my mouth. So
yeah. But to summarize what you were saying the things that you would like entrepreneurs to be aware about is have a clear, tight, focused mission, vision, have a roadmap that's embedded in all operations. So it's not impact as a second roadmap, it's impact as an operational roadmap. And in terms of what you were saying about how important people just talk about the measuring or monitoring, evaluation, planning, but they forget the learning, make sure that there's a learning loop throughout, and that there's the transparency of saying, hey, this worked, this didn't work, let's actually use it, and be honest. And honest is to internally and honest externally. And the other thing that I added in the external consultant piece, because often people hire impact consultants like myself, and they hire us at the end after this whole thing has happened, and they go, help fix it. And this is where, it speaks a little bit about an example of greenwashing or impact washing, or however you want to call it, which is fine on a consultancy basis, but it doesn't ever address the bigger issues of, if we want to become an impact-driven business, it needs to be built into the entire system. And I'd like to hear from you, Pavi, what are some of the insights you've been learning along this journey? So you've shared about what you want entrepreneurs to know, but have you had any surprises in the last 3 months that you're like, whoa, we learned something super cool, we're now going to put it into our operations?
I mean, I think for me, my big learning is, or just something that I'm still getting used to, and in the best way possible, is the transparency, right? Because again, I come from a world where you're not, especially externally, transparent and open about things when they go wrong. So here for me, I often find myself asking, like, am I allowed to say that? And they're like, of course, if you're saying it now, you can say it outside, like it's totally okay. In terms of like specific learnings that to bring back. So every year we put out our annual report, which is called the annual fair report, which I actually have here, which is a super interesting read if you haven't read it yet. And it's a big process. A wise man who may or may not be on this call said that working on this annual report, it's a process, not a project. Which is true, right? Because it's everything that's happened in the past year, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And with each passing year, we do learn on how to make it just a little bit more, even more transparent or easier to read. So that's a constant learning as well, because as transparent as we are, I've recently come to learn that we're transparent about what we say, but maybe not necessarily the way we say it because of how it's in the fair report. So So that's learning that, we take in. So how to report better, for instance. But yeah, I can't think of any more very specific examples at the moment.
I'd really urge people who are listening to this to go and go onto Tony's website and check out their annual report, so you can get a sense of what kinds of things as a business you can report on, and in terms of how to make that engaging and how to make that user friendly. It's a great example. I learned a lot not working at Tony's of what you share and what you don't share, which I found fascinating. And having worked in different places, I found that what was being shared was also quite critical inwardly, which was nice to read. I'd like to ask Yenzo, as a storyteller, what were your big lessons when it came to selling the dream? And what would you like to say to entrepreneurs?
Well, I'd like to first of all reiterate what Pavi said earlier on. I don't think this is a dream. I think this is a clearly defined destination that we can all reach together. And maybe it's not even about selling. It's really about telling this story about how to get there. And what if I think my personal big lesson learned from my perspective is that if you really are consistently and openly and transparently and honestly conveying a story where you can combine knowledge, so I always say combine head, heart, and hands. So it's about knowledge, information, it's about emotion, about feeling, about truthfulness, and then also actionability, something that people can actually do. Like, as a consumer, you need to feel empowered that you can actually vote each and every single day with every purchase decision that you make. That can become a very, very powerful tool combined with a clear purpose as a company. And I think we're not the only showcase out there. I think companies like international companies like Patagonia, or smaller companies in Holland like Yoni and Sapia and Dopper and Mud Jeans are all clear examples of companies that are doing this in exactly the same way and are showing that you can actually reach that change that we all want to, honestly.
No, I think the reason why I use the word dream in the startup land, often you have really amazing Silicon Valley dreams. And those ideas of selling a dream have permeated across Europe as well. And what I really appreciate you saying is that, it's a story of how to get there, a destination. And I think that's something that we'd like the people listening and whoever joins the learning circle to start to think about. It's not two separate connected things. It's actually much more like this, even though it takes a bit of time to explain. So I like.
Yeah, and Michelle, we can all have dreams, and we can have. I have 1,000 of them a day, but in the end, it's about execution, right? It's about actually making it happen.
No, that's really helpful. And for newer people to this kind of business, can you say a little bit about your process of how you became a storyteller? Because I was surprised to hear that you spoke 4 times a day, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, it's very tiring sometimes too, though. But well, for me personally, it was it's completely irrelevant. But I once, when Tony's was like 8 people, I gave them a very functional training on public speaking, because I also taught at university, and I feel it's so important for people to tell stories, right? I mean, we're all programmed to be able to listen to stories. For centuries, we've all sat around the mango trees listening to stories, and it's a powerful tool that we kind of perhaps forgot about the magic of it when we hit the media age. And I think it's coming back again when you look at how we're craving for honesty and truthfulness from companies. So I am no one. I just tell stories.
Well, thank you, Yenzo and Pavi. We're going to open up and get our audience to start to ask some questions. Sarah, would you like to cue in the first person? And thank you both. I really appreciate you coming out and sharing both of your perspectives, because I think often we only get to meet one side of the story, and to have both sides together is really helpful. Sarah, are you there? Okay, good. She's pulling someone up to be a panelist. I think the first panelist speaker will be Sergey. I find that with each technology, it takes a bit of time. It's one of those things. I'm just very grateful that all our Wi-Fi is working. That's kind of my biggest nightmare. Hi, Sergey. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Yes, I have a let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Sergey, and I'm a venture sourcing lead at World Startup. So thank you for a very insightful conversation about Tony. I enjoy Tony like almost every day. I have a question because at World Startup, we're also searching for innovators who could help, for example, strawberry growers in the Netherlands to automate their labor. And my question would be, since there is a clear trend in, at least in Europe, regarding automatization of labor and all of these procedures, this trend will eventually come to Africa as well. So how do you look at this negative and positive impacts regarding automatization of labor, because it would probably solve the problem of illegal work in Africa, because there will be no work anymore to do. So that's basically one of the questions. How do you look at automatization of labor? And the second question related to this: how does Tony measure negative impact that you have? So.
I think I'm whacking this one over to Pavi.
I can try and answer the automation bit, even though one of my colleagues is an actual agronomist and who would have a better answer. So I will also check in with him and send you a more informed answer. But I think, you know, whether automation of labor is going to solve the issues in the cocoa supply chain, I don't think so. So because poverty is still the root cause of the problems that are in the sector, and also the fact that the cocoa value chain is so unequally divided. So you have, you know, the cocoa farmers on the one hand living in poverty, and then you have like the big, you have consumers on the other hand, and then in the middle you have only a handful of companies that kind of control the whole value chain. So things like automation of labor is not going to solve, you know, is not going to address the inequality of the cocoa value chain, is not going to address the problem of poverty. Unless there is a way that it does, then in which case it probably is the silver bullet, right? But I don't think so. In terms of actually how it can help with farming, I'm afraid I don't really have, you know, again, I'm not the expert in that, but does this answer your question to some extent, at least the first part?
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah, because, you know, I mean, if farmers are still living in poverty and they're not earning enough for their cocoa, then, you know, there's also the affordability of automation. So like how does, you know, to introduce automation of farming, the other things need to be addressed as well. So I think if all those boxes are checked, then this could be a great solution. In terms of how do we measure our negative impacts, so we have different KPIs, non-financial KPIs that we report on. And all of those KPIs, you know, we look at the positive and the negative of it. So one of it, for example, is going back to the child labor monitoring and remediation system. So we actively look for child labor cases in our supply chain. And when we find them, well, we're not happy that they're there, but we're happy that we're able to find them so that we can address them. Likewise, for our CO2 emissions, we offset 100% of our CO2 emissions, but then to do that, we see how much our emissions are increasing over the years. So I think for every KPI, they're like, we do kind of look at both ends or both sides of it. Because yeah, I mean, I think everything that we work on does have a positive and negative side. So it's really being able to balance that out.
Thank you.
I think Sarah's just queued up the next panelist.
Yeah, and I can check, I can check with Eva, my colleague, who is the agronomist, again, a little bit more about optimization. I'm sure he has a more technical response for you.
Hopefully Leaky's coming up. I'm just wondering, Pavi. Oh, sorry, Leaky, go for it.
No, go ahead.
I was just wondering, there have been talks, not just in the chocolate sector, but just agriculture in general, like automation will kick many people out of jobs and farmers out of jobs. But I've always wondered, and maybe this is for your colleague, if automation could be even more expensive than current farming methods. And I wonder if, I know that's a really horrible thing to ask, but from an economics perspective, I wonder if that's another reason why automation doesn't make sense in certain sectors.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at, the root cause being poverty, again, like the children working on cocoa farms, not because, they need to, but because they're free labor, right? Which makes it cheap labor. So that's the reality of it. So unless these other big underlying issues are resolved, then automation is not a solution. It's a tool.
It's a horrible statement to think about free labor versus automation, which costs more money.
Yeah.
And that's the comparison. So we're not talking about apples and apples, which I'm not going to go down that route, but I just want to draw attention. Any technological solution can be expensive and costly.
Yeah.
So Leaky?
Yes, thanks. So, well, hi, I'm Lieke from Visual Contracts. So first of all, Pavi and Inzo, I want to congratulate you with the one-pager you recently launched for the one-pager employment contract, because that's and I want to also thank you for that, because it's helping me definitely with the storyline and the market growth for visual contracts as well. And so I'm really appreciating that, and it's really great work. My question is actually indeed about the storytelling regarding like the first years, Inzo, that you were talking about, like when you were not like as known yet. What were the key drivers, you would say, that how people started to pick up the story more or less to actually get being convinced to that this is the way to go?
I think for us, it's always been a combination of three paths towards our mission, more or less, or three ways that people are attracted to Tony's. One is simply to keep coming up with a great tasting chocolate, right? In the end, we make very nice chocolate. I would not be so pretentious to say that we're the best chocolate out there. There's bound to be some chocolatier in the Swiss Alps that probably makes nicer chocolate than we do, but I do think we are the nicest chocolate out there on shelves for everybody to get their hands on in the retail. I mean, 15 years ago in Holland, there were 4 types of chocolate, right? White, milk, dark, and something with nuts sprinkled into it. Now we have 30 to 35 different recipes, rotating recipes, Valentoni's bars, Easter bars, Christmas bars, Santa Claus bars. So there's constantly something nice and surprising for people. That is one. 2 is the way we package, the way we communicate. It's very inclusive. It's very equal. It's not talking down to consumers. It's a matte paper with a ripped out logo that we managed to do in about 10 minutes and then became our font. It's bright colors that jump off the shelf nowadays because it's become a complete rainbow of bars. And the third, obviously, is directly our mission of the 100% slave-free chocolate worldwide that people want to link up to. So you tend to see it's almost equally divided over those 3. And in the end, they need to add up to our mission, obviously. But if people only buy our bars because they love our bars, only buy our bars because they like the way it looks, fine too. We reach that mission too, right? And how was this in the early days? It was by continuously telling this story everywhere we could. I mean, we've become a bit posh now with the amount of South by Southwest conferences and the amount of TED Talks we can do. But in the beginning, and still sometimes it's a classroom. It's a group of 20 people that drop by our office, and we haven't fortunately haven't become so pretentious to not do those things anymore. We still think they are very valuable to speak to the people in the Wereldwinkel in Holte in the east of Holland, right? So it's about seeing the value of telling that story everywhere we can, as Michelle just said, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day.
Thank you.
I think Leaky asked the question that other people wanted. So that was the last question from the audience. I actually have a final question for both of you. And I know both of you do speak a lot, and I wanted to know what has been the most unusual question you've gotten or most surprising. And if you could share it.
Whoa.
I've stumped Yenzo.
Okay, a nice question I got halfway through a podcast the other day was the producer saying, did I actually press the record button? So that was an interesting question. I had no idea whether he actually pressed the record button, and neither did he. So I think recently that was the most surprising question I got halfway through a talk. But obviously I get a lot of questions about what is my favorite chocolate bar, right? And that I love that one. If you had a serious talk for 25 minutes in front of a crowd of 500 people, people want to know what my favorite chocolate bar is. And I can honestly say it's not the caramel sea salt bar for me.
Oh, which one was it?
I figured you're going to put
I
in the
think
second question.
You let it right in. You just let it right in. So I just decided.
Michelle, okay, but here it goes. Everybody always has that one friend that is that person that doesn't continuously ask you questions, that isn't on top of you all the time. That is that one friend you can lay out on the sofa with at Friday evening, chill out, not get any questions. It's always that one friend you always go back to after those funky friends that you go to festivals with. So I think newly launched recipes for me are those funky friends that you go to festivals with. They become your best friend for a short period of time. And I love them. And every time I think, wow, this is the one. But in the end, the one friend I always fall back on is the milk chocolate with hazelnuts, honestly, for me.
Okay, that's your BFF is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. And so Pavi, what is that unusual question you've gotten recently? Hopefully they press record so you don't have the same answer.
No, well, for me, I think this is not so much an unusual question as it is a difficult for me to answer question is on the stakeholders versus shareholders, right? So it's like, how do you bring about or convince internally that, you need to have a more rights-based approach to business when a lot of your internal stakeholders are actually your shareholders. And I think for us, and I say it's difficult for me to answer, and maybe Inzo, you can help me here a bit as well, is because for us it's been it's very clear, right? It's your stakeholders. So it's because it's mission driven. It's been mission driven from the start. And everything follows that. I think it's easier in terms of decision making as well. So this was before my time in Tony's, but a story that I love hearing is that a couple of years ago when the cocoa prices dropped, we had to make an internal decision to increase the premiums that we pay to cocoa farmers. And seemingly that decision was made in less than an hour. Which is unusual, right? I mean, so that's a difficult question for me to answer when others pose it, because I think we don't have that internal challenge or dilemma. So
that's,
yeah.
I mean, this is a forward question in the future, and it would be, as Tony's grows, will it remain as simple as within 1 hour we can answer exactly what we're going to do? We're going to pay the difference. I think that's incredible. Yeah. I think it's really incredible.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Just so that people get a sense of how large is Tony's as a company, like how many people are employed?
We're almost reaching the 200, I think. I think we're
Yeah.
somewhere between 190 and 200 at the moment.
Okay.
So I still consider us quite small if you relate that to the fact that we're doing I think 80-ish million euros revenue last year, and are available in 30 countries, became market leaders in the Netherlands when we weren't even 100 people yet. So it's a lot of hard work being put in by a small amount of people.
Thank you. That's an amazing way to finish. I'm gonna just do a little plug about the next talk, and thank you. Give me a second. Oh no, now we have to go through this whole thing. Sorry, this is like the record button. So thank you for joining the World Startups talk on impact and impact stories. We have Yenzo and Pavi, and it's been a real pleasure. They've shared a lot of different details from the storytelling aspect and also from an impact measurement perspective of what it takes to build a mission-driven company. Our next talk next Tuesday is with James Mitchell and Marai Schaffert. And it's a conversation between an entrepreneur and his impact investor. And the last talk we have in 2 weeks is with Camille Sugrum, and who's been on both sides of the table, and she'll share her best kept secrets around how to nurture that entrepreneur impact investor relationship. And if you'd like to join us for the Learning Circle, that's a deeper dive where we do exercises, including how to build out your impact story. So thank you. And Sarah, I think we'll share some more links about how you can reach out to Yenzo and Pavi and myself, and as well on the actual Learning Circle. So thank you very much. And I would like to say bye. And we'll see you on the debrief on the other side. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you all.
you. Bye.